this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan, tonight 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Welcome to One Thing Trump Did, available exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and if you're new to this podcast, we pick one thing every week coming out of the Trump White House because there is so much, and we try to focus on it, learn as much as we can about it with somebody who knows what they're talking about. And our one thing this week is what's happening with the nation's air traffic control system. Multiple failures at airports following that deadly mid-air collision between an American Airlines passenger plane and a military helicopter in Washington, D.C. in January. That accident brought to light significant issues with the nation's air traffic control system, including aging infrastructure, staffing shortages, and overworked controllers. Since then, in addition to a number of plane crashes around the country, there have also been scary radar outages, particularly at Newark Liberty International Airport outside New York City. The Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, has blamed the Biden administration for passing the buck on upgrading aging infrastructure, and he's promised to modernize the system.
The system we have here, it's not worth saving. I don't need to preserve any of this. It's too old. You got a 1967 Volkswagen Beetle that you're using for transportation. I don't want to preserve the Beetle. I actually want to build a brand new car.
Well, joining me now to help us understand what's going on and what's politics is Seth Kaplan, founder of Airline Weekly and a reporter with Nexstar in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Seth, great to have you on.
A pleasure, Jeremy. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, let's start with the aging infrastructure. What kind of systems are they using across the country, and why haven't they been updated over the years?
Well, one thing everybody could agree on is the system looks nothing like what it would look like if you just designed it from scratch today. This is a legacy system with things added on over the years. So you'll hear some people say occasionally, this is all from the 1960s. Well, that's not entirely true, but it's not entirely false either, because they've sort of added on to an old system over the years. And as with a lot of systems, you have to make it what's called backwards compatible, where the new thing can essentially still work with the old thing. And so there have been some modernizations over the years. I mean, things are different now from how they were many decades ago. On the other hand, though, yeah, when you hear people talk about, they still have the controllers are still looking at these green screens with little dots on them and sort of old radar doing a scan every so many seconds, that is true. And so that's really been a big challenge over the years. I mean, there are funding challenges as all the rest of it, which I'm sure we can talk about. But fundamentally, more than anything else, it's you're just kind of always adding on to this old system rather than just sort of coming out with a clean sheet.
And is it that because just with the nature of air travel, it's not quite 24 hours a day in passenger planes, but it basically is, that it's just too hard to kind of take it offline to upgrade the system?
Yeah, and because you're always going to have airplanes that are 30 years old or more still flying, so you can't come out with a new system that relies on all new what are called avionics in the cockpits of airplanes, the systems on the airplanes themselves, because the system's always going to have to talk to those old airplanes that are going to cycle through, and that's never going to change, right? I mean, 20 years from now, the planes that are 30 years old today won't be flying, but planes that are 30 years old then will be. And so there's always, this trade-off between what we would all dream about in a perfect world and what's actually possible given those realities, including the one you mentioned, that we can't just shut down the system for a year to roll out something new.
But they're going to have to do something, especially at this point. So how do they upgrade the system? How long will it take to upgrade the system to where they want it to be?
Well, there's something called NextGen. It's the next generation air traffic control system that has been talked about for about more than 2 decades now, that this has been going on, and some people joke that it's already yesterday gen. And officially there's this date of about 2030 that they hope to have it essentially rolled out. Nobody really believes that it's going to be entirely rolled out then. But what's undoubtable is that, and indisputable, is that all of these recent events do definitely put this in the spotlight and help the people who are advocating for more funding and for all the things that have sort of been kicked down the road for so many years, precisely because things had been running, at least from a standpoint of people actually dying in commercial airline crashes, rather well for the past couple decades until this year.
What about the staff shortages? How long has that been an issue? And I should note, they're also having air traffic controller staff shortages in Canada, in addition to the United States. So this is not something that's unique to the U.S. But what's going on there?
Yeah, and part of it's just a demographic issue, right? That you have fewer young people right now and people aging out and that's a challenge in other industries too, as you said, a challenge in other countries as well. But yeah, this is something that for years has been bubbling up, and at some point you get into kind of this vicious cycle where, and you mentioned Newark, and we could talk more about Newark if you'd like, but where you have people who say they just feel burned out, where those same people, if the staffing were better, might still be able to work, but then they're calling in sick. And so what is a certain shortage becomes an even bigger shortage precisely because of the shortage and people who say that they're just leaving the field because it's just too difficult.
The Trump administration also laid off hundreds of FAA employees in February. How much did that contribute to this problem?
Well, and this is an interesting thing, Jeremy. Sometimes in history, you're fortunate enough from an analytical standpoint to live in a very stable time where not much changes, and then there's one thing happens, and then you can kind of measure, like, if something else in that same realm happened, then this thing probably caused that thing. What's difficult now is it's hard to control for anything because so many different things have happened, right? The crash, especially the American Airlines crash from the plane flight from Wichita to DCA, but also all these other incidents, what has happened at Newark, and all those layoffs you mentioned at the FAA. So hard to say what's the cause and what's the effect of all of these things, but it's not hard to say that all of those things have mattered, and certainly, you talk to people at the FAA, and that wasn't helpful. Even if you can't say, as some people might want to say, that caused all of what's going on now.
Well, and the layoffs happened after the crash at DCA also, but they happened before what's been happening at Newark. So what's going on at Newark, and why is it specific to Newark Airport? I mean, I know it's happening in a couple of other places, but mainly it's happening at Newark Airport, these outages on the radar.
Well, yeah, radar outages, Jeremy, that in aviation terms are long periods of time, even if they don't sound like it in the rest of the world. 90 seconds at a time, radar going down. One of them happened in the middle of the night, not much impact. One happened in the middle of the day, and quite clearly everybody was fortunate, although there are redundancies in place, that nothing went catastrophically wrong. And so these are things where, you've got some of the same equipment that exists in other places, but for whatever reason, it failed in Newark, and in a very scary way that has now caused the government to say, look, we just can't have as many flights there as we've had. We need to build in more margin for error. And so through a combination of airlines kind of voluntarily reducing their own flights and directives, now we have far fewer flights at Newark than we had previously, in a world where, generally speaking, more people are flying than have ever flown before.
Just to make a comparison to what we do every week on the middle, we have we have a Comrex. It's like a device that allows the signal to transmit from where I am to our studio in Illinois. And then they have 2 Comrexes to go to Washington, D.C. to get it up to the satellite for distribution, just in case one of them goes down. We have lost our entire phone system at times. It just drops all of a sudden and then it comes back. But that's not putting anybody's life at risk. It's just kind of surprising to me that there's not more redundancy already built in than this, where that could even be an issue. When the radar goes down, you think, oh, okay, we just go to the backup now.
Exactly. And that's the idea of redundancies, backups and backups to backups. And with the crash at Reagan, I think a lot of us, including those of us who feel like we know a fair amount about this industry, were surprised at some of the things that were not previously understood about sort of how little margin for error was built in. That perhaps that Black Hawk was 75 feet or so higher than it should have been, but the idea that it was even a matter of just 75 feet that could have caused a catastrophic crash like that surprised a lot of people. And in fact, those things have changed already there. And so, yes, the redundancies are there, but as you said, Jeremy, whether they're there to the extent that they should be for something that can kill people as opposed to the Comrex in your studio, that's very much under the microscope right now.
There was also a plane crash in San Diego last month. 6 people died, and some of the issues that the NTSB has pointed to were malfunctioning runway lights and a broken weather alert system. So when we hear that in the context of everything else that's going on, it sounds like there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be updated.
No question. And we saw, again, sort of the for lack of a better way of saying it, kind of the marquee crash that really shook everybody was that American Airlines crash, because that's a flight any of us feel like we could have been on, right? But there have been others as well. And I should say this too, again, sort of going back to what causes, what's new and what's not. We do have this heightened sensitivity now to anything that happens, understandably so, because of what happened back in late January at Reagan Airport. And so, crashes like the one in San Diego, that's not entirely unique. There have been other times when, again, for lack of a better word, lack of a more sensitive way of saying it, that those smaller numbers of people have died in a plane crash that's not a commercial airline crash that causes headlines throughout the country, and where we don't necessarily collectively pay as much attention to it. So part of it now is that we are paying attention more to things that, rightfully so, by the way, but that we weren't paying attention to in the past. So that's not entirely new what happened in San Diego, but it, absolutely, it highlights the issue.
Well, and by the way, there have actually been, we are paying a lot of attention, but there have actually been fewer crashes this year overall by this point than there were last year, which is interesting.
Right. And so, and people have asked me, for example, what's the safest airline? Those kinds of things. You can imagine people in my life. And I say, that's a hard question to answer for a relatively good reason, which is that things like what happened in January have become so rare that we don't really have a sample size to be able to make that do that kind of analysis, right? Back in the 1990s, as recently as that, which is not all that long ago, you'd have a few fatal plane crashes a year in America, right? And you could say back then, you could look at it and say, oh yeah, U.S. Air has had, a few plane crashes, Charlotte and Pittsburgh, that, are they more dangerous than Delta? And reasonable people could disagree about the answer to that, but there was a sample size. Whereas now it just is so rare. And as you said, we had that one awful crash, but overall, yes, the system is still, in terms of most of the ways that we can measure it, about as safe as it's ever been, which is not to say it's what it should be.
What about the controllers who are on the job, Seth? They've been complaining that they're overworked and overstressed. What do we know about that? And has that changed with Trump coming in, or is it pretty much something that just existed long before?
Well, there's no question it existed before. These are not new complaints. And one thing you always have to kind of look at with any kind of management labor relations, candidly, is you have to try to separate out, very legitimate complaints, and these are folks who obviously have those. From, on the other hand, sometimes those legitimate complaints can also be used to advance other agendas, right?
Get paid more or something like that.
Get paid more, exactly. So these are unionized workers who have a very hard job, and they deserve everything they get, and clearly things are not okay for them. But we just have to recognize that. That's an important part of the analysis. Is that every group of workers is going to say, if you don't. They understand that you want to make an argument that's going to resonate with somebody else. You don't want to say you should do this because it's what I want. They're smart enough to say you should do this because it's what you should want. And many of these things that is true. But at the same time, these are people who are like anybody else, like any of us, interested in, getting paid as much as we think we're worth and that sort of thing. So not new complaints, but definitely a new environment here in terms of the federal government's approach toward federal workers in general.
Well, and the administration is now offering 20% bonuses for people in the air traffic control world who are near retirement to get them to stay on the job and get their salary plus 20%. You think that's going to make a difference? Do you think that these bonuses? Retention bonuses and people that are near retirement saying, okay, fine, I'll work another couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it shows, there's all kinds of incentives that work, and that shows you what a priority this has become, set against the backdrop of what's happening with everybody else, people getting paid to leave, and these are people getting paid extra to stay.
Well, stay with us because we're going to talk about solutions in a moment. One thing Trump did with Airline Weekly founder Seth Kaplan. We'll be right back.
Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
You see it instantly. It's Cold Water Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years
right where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to One Thing Trump Did exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This episode, we're talking about mounting issues with the country's air traffic control infrastructure and problems for air travel. I'm joined by journalist Seth Kaplan, founder of Airline Weekly and a reporter with Nexstar in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Seth, let's talk about one thing that is being reported on now, that they're talking about using AI to help alleviate the controller gap or to help bolster safety measures for air traffic control. What can you tell us about that?
AI clearly has done all kinds of things in the past few years, both good and bad, but a lot good that none of us would have imagined not too many years ago. And yes, machine learning, just these things that computers we think might be able to detect patterns and so forth that human brains and eyes can't detect. The idea is that those same kinds of algorithms could help us figure out, what really matters more and what doesn't matter as much in terms of spacing aircraft apart from each other, those sorts of things that are still done rather manually in a world of so much other automation. And so the idea here is can that AI, still a rather new technology, and that's the part that's also scary here, right? But one that's helped in other realms, can it help with this in a way that number one, makes things safer, but also over the long term, and this is an important goal too, just makes things more efficient, because airplanes right now fly in all kinds of crazy patterns in the sky also because of those old systems. That's the biggest impact, by the way, Jeremy, on all of us, right? Again, we talked, despite it all, the flying is still really safe by any measure compared to any other time in history, all of that. But it's really inefficient, right? It's really bad for the environment compared to what it could be if airplanes could just fly in straight lines from their origin to their destination rather than going in all kinds of out of the way patterns because precisely of all this old equipment and that sort of thing. So ideally, automation could help make things not only safer, but more efficient, get us to where we're going more quickly, burn less fuel.
And they're even talking about using it to have, just one pilot on the plane instead of two. They right now, I guess, require a co-pilot for most flights. And in this case, maybe AI would take the other seat, which made me a little skeptical at first. But then I took a Waymo the other day for the first time, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't feel so bad about this. This driver seems pretty good. In fact, it was a little bit aggressive at times, making some lane changes. So, Seth, do you think that there are people who have actually stopped flying because of all of this worry in the last few months?
That goes back to what I said earlier about just so many new things, variables that are hard to control, that it's hard to measure, right? If only that had happened, but we weren't also, oh, by the way, in a trade war that has people, in some cases, actually suffering economically, in other cases, avoiding certain kinds of travel to the United States, for example, from other countries, that would be easier to measure. In the real world, all of that is happening. But I can say, Jeremy, that airlines did say, even before things got to quite where they are right now, that there was some kind of not huge, but measurable impact on consumer travel demand in the wake of the airline crash. So I think it's fair to say there's a non-zero number of people. There's somebody not flying today who would have flown perhaps if not for that, even if that's probably not the biggest force right now in the wake of everything else I described. And even if, by the way, that might not be a wise choice by that person, depending on what else they're doing instead of flying. I tell people in my own life that all the time. They say, well, should I fly? I say, well, what's your alternative? Are you going to stay home the rest of your life? Because, well, okay, I guess that would be safer. Wouldn't be terribly interesting. But if you're saying, should I fly instead of driving, we know the statistics on that.
Well, and even if a small percentage of people have decided that they're not flying, I imagine the airlines are not happy about that. What kind of leverage do they have with regards to the air traffic control system? Are they knocking down on the door of Sean Duffy saying, you better figure this out? Do they have to pay for some of the upgrades? Like, how do the airlines fit in to this?
Well, that's long been a big part of it, right? It's been this kind of chicken and egg issue of over the decades. This goes back way before the current administration, way before the last administration. But the government sort of saying, okay, airlines, you need to pay for some of this. You need to put certain kinds of avionics on your aircraft, for example, so that the new stuff, actually does what it's supposed to do. And airlines basically saying, well, why should we invest this money if it's taking forever to put the infrastructure in place that needs to be there for the new stuff on the airplanes to work. So they're a very big part of the process, and certain airlines, Delta notably over the years is one that's sort of argued, hey, we can't just throw our hands up and say this is somebody else's problem. We need to be active about this. I mentioned them, but they're certainly not the only ones. United and others active in that regard. So they're a big part of the process.
So, this show is called One Thing Trump Did. The Trump administration is blaming the Biden administration for the situation with air traffic control, and vice versa to some degree. What do we know about what's true? Is there blame to be assigned to one administration or the other for this problem that we're facing right now?
Well, in this industry, you could also probably blame the Ford administration, right, or the Nixon administration for some of the things that are wrong. So to try to assign cause and effect, and that is something we tend to see maybe from this president more than even others, is the whatever bad happens must be the previous administration, whatever good happens must be something that was caused sometime after January 20th. And the reality is this situation's been building up over a long time. On one hand, all kinds of problems. On the other hand, again, you add it all up, and flying is still really, really safer than it used to be. Thanks largely, by the way, to automation, right? And so we have to be careful about that too, is when people say, as you said with Waymo, right? Scary, but right? So with this too, the idea of not having two pilots in a cockpit, yeah, that scares me. On the other hand, other kinds of automation have helped get us to this rather safe environment that we're in right now.
All right, I want to ask you one more thing, Seth, and it's sort of unrelated to this, but we kind of got into it a moment ago, which is airline butts in seats, they say, like how many people are flying on these planes. We are hearing that foreign tourism is way down because of the tariffs, certainly from Canada, also from Europe. People just not happy with Trump. They don't want to come to the United States. They're worried that, there's going to be some problem with immigration when they get here. How is that affecting the airlines right now?
Well, right now, when you try to net it all out, and when I say all, I'm including cheaper fuel, which oil is cheaper probably partly because of all the instability in the world right now, right? But we have to offset all those challenges with that airlines are paying a lot less for this really important thing that they buy. Mm-hmm. So they are still doing rather well right now. And because fuel is so much cheaper, I can't even sit here and say that they're doing any worse, bottom line, than they might have been doing if not for all of this. But if we're just talking about travel demand, revenue, no question that it adds up to something meaningful, albeit not devastating. We do see airlines making small trims in their schedules, especially late summer, that part of the year when in America, especially schools kind of in the South and the West, go back early in August, and airlines that maybe were a little more ambitious about what they thought they could get in terms of butts in seats late in the summer, dialing it down a little bit. But only in small ways right now. Because also, Jeremy, this is an industry that's still kind of recovering from a shortage of aircraft that it had for so long. And so that's part of it too, is that they were in growth mode for all kinds of reasons, including that they were just kind of playing catch up from their perspective.
Yeah, interesting that the cost of oil matters more to them in some ways than the amount of people who want to fly on their planes.
Or at least as much, yeah. And the precise answer, and that's a whole other show, is different airlines maybe care more about one than the other, right? There are airlines who really depend on premium revenue, who it's all about how many people are flying business class across the Atlantic. There are other people who it's other airlines that carry rather price sensitive travelers from the Midwest to Punta Gorda, Florida, and places like that, and who maybe don't usually charge all that much anyway, and if they can save on fuel, then that's a big deal. But to one extent or another, yeah, it's all, the bottom line is literally that it's revenues minus costs, and what matters most of all is where they end up there, not how they get there.
That is Seth Kaplan, who is founder of Airline Weekly and a reporter with Nexstar in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Seth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And thanks to you for listening to One Thing Trump Did. It was produced by Harrison Patino. Our next middle episode will be in your podcast feed later this week. We're going to be talking about the role that Christianity plays in our politics. It is an encore episode from last year, but it's so good we're playing it again. It's actually our most downloaded podcast episode ever. And I will be not able to do a live show because I am on a bike ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles for AIDS Life Cycle. And you can learn more about that at listentothemiddle.com. If you like this podcast, please rate it wherever you get your podcasts and write a review. Our theme music was composed by Noah Haidu. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Talk to you soon.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drive better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human. Quality proteins aren't just for special occasions. With Omaha Steaks, you get unbeatable flavor and value delivered right to your door. They have an unmatched selection of perfectly portioned proteins, including USDA-certified tender steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, and more. All flash frozen at their moment of peak quality, then quickly delivered to your door in a dependable cooler. So a great dinner is just minutes away. From Taco Tuesday to a weekend feast, Omaha Steaks practically invented meat delivery, and they've been perfecting the art of premium proteins for over 100 years. With their 100% satisfaction guarantee, you can order with complete confidence. Taste the Omaha Steaks difference, a better, more convenient way to buy proteins. Start getting flavorful proteins delivered today. Visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.